Hey, when I say oysters, I'll bet you think of a menu item served up at a beachside restaurant. And I also bet you don't think of Cincinnati as an oyster hotbed. After all, we're way inland and we've got a slew of local delicacies already. But you'd be wrong about that. This town's torrid love affair with oysters really is a Cincinnati curiosity.
Way before chili, even before goetta, Cincinnati's favorite dish was oysters. In the 1800s, Cincinnati consumed something like 2.5 million oysters every year, and more than 30 Cincinnati businesses packed, shipped, or served oysters. Cincinnati craved oysters so much that the appetite inspired faster transportation. As soon as Cincinnati was settled, shops sold pickled or spiced oysters in cans. By the 1830s, entrepreneurs had worked out a system of speedy wagons to get fresh oysters from Baltimore to Wheeling, West Virginia, where steamboats could haul the tasty cargo to Cincinnati. From Chesapeake Bay to the public landing, the entire trip took just 5 days, with new ice added along the way to keep those oysters in prime condition. A few years later, railroads shortened that run to just hours. Mail runs were profitable for stagecoach lines, but not as profitable as oysters. And stagecoach drivers shoved barrels of iced oysters into every available space on wagons departing Baltimore. Cincinnati newspapers claimed that mail deliveries were arriving late because the postal coaches broke down or flipped over from being overloaded with oysters. After eating so many oysters, Cincinnati had to do something with mountains of leftover shells, so the city used them to pave roads. Several roads in Cincinnati were originally paved with scattered oyster shells. Horses' hooves ground them fine and created a shining white roadbed. Cincinnatians didn't even have to go to a restaurant to satisfy their hunger for oysters. They could just wait until the oyster hawker pushed the wagon past their residence. No matter how Cincinnati diners ordered their oysters, whether fresh out of the shell or steamed, fried, or stewed, gourmands usually added some sort of flavoring. If the condiment of choice was a hot sauce, odds are it was brewed right here in the Queen City. 2 brands of locally concocted chili sauce in particular, Snyder's and later Frank's, had wide distribution outside the tri-state region. Now, as much as Cincinnati loved oysters, the pig was still king in Porkopolis. A 1905 dictionary defined Cincinnati oyster as a pig's foot, pickled and served during free lunch at the local saloon.
All right, let's welcome back the king of curiosities, our good buddy Greg Handgreg. So glad to have you here with us this morning.
Always a pleasure.
Now, you said at one point people here ate 2.5 million oysters every year. How did Cincinnatians eat all those oysters?
Now, I came across a menu from 1859, and this is amazing. This is a menu for a single dinner. They had oysters baked in shells. They had scallops of oysters. They had oysters baked with herbs, small oyster pies, raw oysters, oysters baked in a form, oysters stewed in champagne, oysters baked with cheese, fried oysters, pickled oysters, and aspics of oysters, all at one single dinner.
And those spiced oysters, what were those?
Oh, I was afraid to find out. Spiced oysters kept coming up, especially in the early days when in Cincinnati you had to get your oysters in cans. And I found some old cookbooks from the 1800s, and the preparations they have for spiced oysters sound positively vile. I do not associate myself oysters with nutmeg, cloves, allspice, and those sorts of ingredients. But apparently that's what they spiced oysters with back in the 1800s. And apparently people in Cincinnati thought it was quite the delicacy.
So connecting Cincinnati chili to oysters, what do oyster crackers have to do with oysters?
Yeah, see, so you get these oyster crackers with your Cincinnati chili, and you wonder, what's the connection to oysters? Well, it turns out that there are really two ways that oyster crackers got their names. One, they got their name because they are kind of shaped like some sort of bivalve. They're not really shaped like oysters, but you could picture a clam or something like that. And that led to part of their name. The other, and the real connection to oysters, is oyster stew and oyster chowders tended to be kind of greasy. They were made with oysters that had been fried in lard and butter, and a lot of that grease was in there. And so these crackers serve the purpose that they do with chili, and that's to soak up some of the grease from the cooking.
All right, Greg, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for serving up, get it, serving up another curiosity on the half shell for us.
Take care and enjoy your oysters no matter how they're prepared.